All right, Jeff, so what more can you tell us about where things stand with Saquon and the Giants?
Well, quite honestly, Field, that's exactly the sentiment I get when I talk to people inside the building within the Giants organization, that there is no real update or necessarily progress at this point, but it is a scenario where you have until July 17th. That's about as honest of a sentiment as you can get from a player who's going through this right now, a la Le'Veon Bell several years ago. We know how that ultimately worked out for Bell, and I think by most regards, people would say it wasn't a good move. It did not work out good. We don't have much more precedent than that. Otherwise, he could report, play, and next year the Giants would have to decide whether to tag him again or, in fact, him become a free agent.
Always hard to figure out these running back contracts. But a little bit of context on how Saquon Barkley performed last year, as he was 4th in the NFL in rushing last season, and he's part of a group of running backs that's facing some uncertainty going forward. He and Josh Jacobs were both given the franchise tag. Miles Sanders left the Eagles in free agency after he had the 5th most rushing yards in the league. And of course, Dalvin Cook was just released by the Vikings. Take a look at the rushing leaders from last season and where they stand right now. All right, so Dan, this is a spirited conversation we had in our pre-show meeting. This should be even better right now. How do you come to a conclusion if you are the Giants trying to find a solution for Saquon Barkley?
Well, they have to answer the question, do they think he's more Nick Chubb or Christian McCaffrey?
Okay.
Because Chubb's salary is pretty equivalent to what the top back, as far as production, is. McCaffrey makes more than George Kittle and Travis Kelce because he's not a true back. He's utilized differently. So the Giants and Joe Shane, their general manager, and Brian Dable, they have to figure that out. I know this about the Giants with Saquon Barkley. They're a playoff team with him. They are not a playoff team without him. Daniel Jones has like 1,100 completions in his career. Saquon accounts for 25% of them. He's their tailback. So that's the reality of their offense. They ran their offense through Saquon last year. But if they're going to pay him $16 million a year, they got to use him like Christian McCaffrey is used in San Francisco or Kamara is used in New Orleans. If not, then he falls somewhere closer to that 12 or 13 that Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb make.
Yeah, it's really tricky because I think you brought up those 3 names, McCaffrey, Chubb, and then, of course, Saquon, who we're talking about. And the reality is Saquon is less efficient as a back than Nick Chubb, but he's more versatile. However, I don't think he's as much of a threat as a pass catcher as Christian McCaffrey. So he's weirdly kind of in between them. Like Christian McCaffrey ranked 1st in the NFL amongst all running backs in yards per route run. Saquon, a pretty distant 9th. Now, some of that is scheme and defenses, not expecting the Giants to throw downfield for sure. But I do think Christian McCaffrey is a very unique running back, which makes him a difficult comp. The reality is running back contracts have stabilized and gone down in large part because teams know they can get similar production from guys on rookie contracts. Field, you put up the rushing leaders, but if you look at yards per carry of the top 12 backs, 8 were on rookie contracts last season. So for the Giants, while they need Saquon now, and I think that gives him some leverage because this is a team that needs him. He's good for, he fits in well with their offense. They also don't want to commit resources to him for the long term, knowing that they're likely to get more production cheaper later.
Marcus, real quick before you jump in. The second thing, or the last thing I'd say is there's only one team in the last 5 seasons that has given top 10 money to the quarterback position, a defensive tackle, and a tailback. That's the Tennessee Titans. It's hard to do. The Giants have already paid Daniel Jones top 10 and Dexter Lawrence. They also have the most expensive tight end in football in Darren Waller. There's a lot of money. There's only so much left over for Saquon.
Really quick, the Henry contract was quite reasonable, too. It was really just a 2-year deal. The average came in lower than people expected. I think if they were to arrive at something like that with Saquon, it would be fair.
I was just thinking about yet another running back. As far as veteran contracts are concerned, no player was a better bargain in football last year than Austin Eckler. For running backs, right? Okay. And he had to scratch and claw this offseason, including requesting a trade, to get the opportunity to make $1.75 million more to basically replicate last year's success.
You're talking about the value of a running back.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting now is that, even the guys that are as versatile as Austin Eckler are having a hard time. The league seems to just be gravitating towards a different approach when it comes to running backs.
Well, I think the reality is outside of quarterback, the league trends to I want younger and cheaper no matter the position, 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we have to stop saying, well, the league doesn't value backs. That's incorrect.
Okay.
The league values backs at a different age more so than any other position. The best value for a running back is their first contract.
Yeah.
That is indisputable. Like the best value for a tight end is usually when they get into their second and third contract. Mina just pointed out 8 of the top 12 rushers were rookies. The other 4 are 4 of the top 5 paid guys at the position.
Is that right?
So it's just that we have to define undervalued. If we look at like the top 10 running back salaries, they're not that different than the top 10 tight end salaries. The best value for a back in their contract is when you take them first, those first 4 or 5 years, and it's just because their age more so than the position.
I've said this before. I almost wish running backs weren't subject to the rookie wage scale because they're the position who are hurt the most by it, because teams are aware of what Dan just said, which is they're able to get similar production from players on these cost-controlled contracts, right? I mean, running backs' their production tends to peak when they're 26 years old, I believe. So by the time they actually have the chance to hit free agency, they're already past their peak. So you can't undo reality and you can't change the dynamics of when these backs are efficient. To me, it would have to be some sort of structural change to undo some of these trends in how they're paid.
Yeah, and I think in the long run, like it's individual positioning, right? Like if your team is heavy use of what you do, your skill set outside of just handing the football off, and I don't think running backs are going to get paid, to your point, Dan, when you have a quarterback that is going to be making $200+ million. Teams are not going to value that. So I think it's particular situation. You almost got to hit it at the right time and be in the perfect situation to get paid.
Yeah, we talk often about players maybe were born in the wrong era, and it's like their skill set would have been highlighted more, or is highlighted more today than it would have been 20 years ago. For running backs, it's the opposite. I remember the Marshall Faulk days and Edgerrin James and guys who are going 4th overall and justified for much of their career. Perhaps running backs need to turn back the clock if they can find a way to do so.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.